All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
Men's Right Act.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 361. Now mourns, and now still mourns the loss of their cash cows. I think I didn't change the title on this page, but I'm your host Hannah Wallen here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks, and we're back this week after a short break, where I got to be a pathological ditz. But if you want to hear about that, you have to join us in the patron-only after show, which I'll explain in a minute. This week, the one thing I did get done during my time off was that page that I couldn't find during the show 2 weeks ago. I had it on my other computer. I had it open on my other computer, the one I only use at work. So I have it now. And we're going to take a look at it. And the format is going to be shit, and I'm really sorry for that, but I don't really have a better way of showing it to you. So, in any case, we're going to be looking at some serious bullshit this week. But before we get to that, and before Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks, the personification of perceptivity, and the Doge in charge, Lauren Brooks, Mike Stevenson, and Brian Martinez in the background not talking.
Hi.
Before we get to that, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly, instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justatip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And if you go to that link, feedthebadger.com, you can find out how to join us in the patron-only after shows, how to join us in our Discord, all kinds of fun things. So I have one other housekeeping announcement, and that is I did organize a date for the Mixed Up Meetup, which is going to be Saturday, August 16th. And I'll publish further information about that on honeybadgerbrigade.com coming up, so that people will be able to, I'm going to tell you where to go, and I won't tell you what to do when you get there. As soon as you know where it is, you'll know what to do. But considering that it's a mix of men's rights activists and gamers that follow me that I'm reaching out to for this, it'll be some place that everybody will be able to enjoy. There will be food. There will be things to do. There will be things to do that aren't unique to one group, and there will also be things to do like outside of the particular store that we're going to be in, so people can run around back and forth and stuff. And we're not starting at the museum this year. I don't think we have to worry about anything anymore. But if people are too deeply concerned, we can always meet there and drive over. And we're not trying to do an overnight this year because I just have too many irons in the fire and not enough space to do it. So And the other thing is, on September, I gotta look to make sure I am going to give you guys the
13th.
absolutely correct date. It's the 13th, right? Okay. So I believe that's also a Saturday, which is good because if it was Saturday the 14th, then we would have to watch out for owls. Shout out to Gen Xers. But there will be one in Canada, and I will have to get the details on that one as well. From I believe that's going to be in Calgary, but I'm not 100%. So I'll probably make one post with the details of both, and then in any new information that we get after that, any changes, anything, those will follow. So be watching the blog for those posts, and hopefully we will get to see some of y'all at the different meetups. Obviously, we aren't expecting necessarily a big crowd at the Mix Up meetup. We never get a humongous crowd or anything like that, but I think we usually have about 10 to 20. I think one year we had more, so look forward to that. And like I said, watch the blog, and you'll see a post on meetups sometime this week. And with that, I will get into the meat of the discussion. So last show, I can't say last week because we missed a week, but last show, we looked at this first page of the National Organization for Women's pitiful whining about not getting all of your money for women's initiatives. And one of them was this right here. I can highlight it. It's going to put this dumb thing up on, but you can see the blue area. That's what we looked at. And if you'll remember, I had a list of these hundreds of grants, but couldn't find it on my tabs. And the reason was it wasn't these tabs, but it is now. And like I said, this format sucks, and it's going to be a pain in the patoot to read. But the the stuff that they've discontinued, they're whining about being discontinued. It starts out sounding pseudo reasonable, like the Center for Integrated Quantum Materials at Harvard University. I have no idea what they actually do. To be fair, right? And then we have the next, and as it goes on, it starts to get more specialized, and you start to realize that, hey, this is all diverting money to tiny little groups or specialized groups that could be made available to the broader population, or they're paying for absolute crap. So collaborative research, the Pacific Northwest Alliance, to develop, implement, and study a STEM graduate education model for Native Americans or for American Indians and Native Alaskans. So apparently, in order for people of Native American heritage, you have to do STEM differently. That sounds kind of insulting, if you ask me.
I mean, how many Native Alaskans even are there, really? I mean, I know humans can live in all sorts of places, but Alaska? I mean,
yeah, there's some tribes there. In fact, there was a very interesting study done on them years ago. It was published in 2004. I read about it in Discover magazine. The article was called the Inuit Paradox, and it was about the fact, like, you can't garden, in the tundra because it's frozen. So only plants that evolved to grow in that area will grow there. And, like, you can't grow corn and tomatoes and stuff like that. So they didn't bother with trying to do any of that stuff. Somebody is hearing silly gaming sounds in the background. Whatever it is not coming through to my end, so I'm not sure if it's beeps that are happening because of a sound issue or what, but it's not. I can't hear it, so I don't know what to tell you. But in any case, their diet consisted mainly of meat and like seaweed and blubber. They didn't really have access to plants that they could digest. The fiber in the plants that grow there is too thick, too hard to digest, and humans don't have what they need in order to digest it. But caribou do. And so the caribou eats the plant, and you kill and eat the caribou, and then you get the benefit. And they
And
were
you try
healthy. They
not
were
to get
extremely
killed by
healthy.
you try not to get killed by a bear. This is why there aren't that many people in the
Oh, no.
northernmost reaches of the tundra, because there's
They got pretty
giant
good at
fucking
killing.
bears everywhere.
They get pretty good
That's
at
your main
killing
piece of
and
advice: avoid bears.
yeah. No. They get pretty good at killing and eating the bears too. They chose the bear for dinner. The Inuit chose the bear for dinner, and the caribou, and I don't know if I think moose go up that far north. Seals, fish, uh, if they can get them. Any other bigger fish, sharks. Probably not very many whales, at least not adult ones. But in any case, they were very healthy, right? And then you get past the generation that would be their equivalent of baby boomers and their children, my generation. Not that I'm related, but the Gen Xers, got access to grocery stores, and they got access to fast food, and they got access to all kinds of like mail order treats and stuff like that. And their diet changed significantly. They began eating things that were not part of their traditional diet, and they began consuming processed foods, meat that didn't, when it was an animal, consume plants, but consumed more carbs, like didn't eat fibrous plants, but consumed grains instead, and so on. And they all had, the huge number of them became overweight and developed diabetes in their 30s. Huge change. Was unheard of previously. And all of a sudden, so there was all kinds of like discussion. Is this because their diet changed significantly from the diet of their ancestors, or is it specifically because of the things that were in that diet? Was it the carbs? Was it the meat not being grass fed, and so on? So there's been like all kinds of theories come out of that. So there's plenty of people there. But the thing is, this study makes it sound like they're not smart enough to study science and technology the same way as everybody else does. Which, if you did a study like this back when the cultural differences were so dramatic that it might be like speaking gibberish to speak Tekanese to them, that might have some merit, not in terms of smarts, but in terms of cultural barriers to understanding each other. But we're talking about the post-millennial generation. And if Gen X had access to all of that fast food and stuff, Gen X had access to all of the different cultural changes that non-native Gen X, if you want to call us that, even though we were all born in the United States, that we went through, then the millennial generation and the post-millennial generations should be pretty much exposed to non-Inuit culture all around. Like they should be pretty much able to, if not integrate, at least have a solid grasp on and be able to communicate and exchange. There shouldn't be a need for a study like this. But they spent $1,257,000 on it. $1 million. $257,000 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 on it. $1 milli to go translate STEM for the poor. Like I can't do it.
We don't even
It
know what
sounds like
stems are. Yeah, we don't. Stems are from plants, and we don't eat plants. Eh? We only eat seals and fish.
I'm so sorry. This is embarrassing. My country did this. And then it goes on. Collaborative research, identity development evaluation of African American science students. Identity development? They don't know who they are yet? We have to study their identity development
Before we can do the science.
They gave it a cute little acronym too. Ideas.
That almost sounds racist. Is that just me? Am I just saying that in my head in a racist way?
Longitudinal. Huh?
No, it's racist.
Ideas. They're investigating the Greater Alabama Black Belt region, which they refer to as Gabber. I didn't even know that existed. Oh, that's another one. The Greater Alabama Black Belt region, Gabber, and then it says LSAMP, and there's not anything more to that. And each of these is a different university, right? That had almost 5 million. It's like $5 short of 5 million. I wonder why they cut it short like that.
All right, like, just take the extra $5. You got change for 1,000.
Someone skimmed a bit too much off the top accidentally. Because let's face it, none of this goes to the actual people that it's proposed to go to. It all gets siphoned into the coffers of government employees. That's the whole point of all of this.
So it's the funny thing about this is it makes me think of how stores will market to women, right? It's not $1,000, right? It's $999.95.
Yeah,
that's not that much compared to 1,000, right? Girl math. Girl math. It looks like I have a super chat. Doge is letting me know. So before I read on, I will super chat the super chat. Let me see here. I do not see or super chow, I guess, because I do not see a super chat. Oh, yes, I do. Okay. Master Rogue gave us $2 and said, "This isn't racist either." Hannah. I'm glad to see you too, Master Rogue. Yes, Art 4's The Invasion of the Gabber Robots. So we have collaborative research, identity development of African American science students, and then we have the Greater Alabama Black Belt region, and it doesn't explain anything else about that. Then we have, let's see, a collaborative research, the Texas A&M system, a model to advance historically underrepresented minorities in the STEM professoriate.
Can you just teach people STEM? Like, can you just teach people like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics without like saying, "Good for you doing STEM while you're black"? Like, is that strictly necessary part of the curriculum?
They were going to spend $600,000 pulling minorities out of STEM professions to become professors. That's what that was about. Really, because usually when they try to increase the number of a group of people, they're not putting them through school and then saying, "Well, just become you have to know the subject to teach." So they're looking at, well, can we get more black electrical engineers to come in and train electrical engineers? So I know when I was studying at university and I took my anatomy and physiology class, there were a whole bunch of things that I paid very careful attention to. I couldn't tell you what my professor looked like. I think that professor was male. But I had a female professor for abnormal psychology. That's not a joke. Don't
For
read
what
anything into that.
psychology?
Abnormal psychology. There's psychology. There's like early childhood development is a psychology course where you learn about how the brain develops in early childhood. There's, psychology where you learn the normal functions of the brain, and abnormal psychology is when you learn about things like what is bipolar disorder and what are some of the prevailing therapies that
Toxic
are currently being
masculinity,
used
right?
for it, right? Yeah. And it's where I learned about why my doctor, when I was showing some pretty severe symptoms of obsessive compulsive personality disorder, actually made me do the things that I was avoiding and avoid the things that I was obsessing over doing. It's called contracting, and it's to break the mentality that forces you into those habits. But yeah, that professor was, I think my A&P professor was a guy. Because I remember a male voice. This is really bad, but just so you guys know, I took the class in like 1994 or 95, somewhere along. So it's been a while. So there are all kinds of things I do remember. I could tell you that the little dangly thing that hangs down in the bottom and back of your throat is called a uvula, and it's not sexual. But it's not like the vulva. But it sounds similar enough that we're all titillated over it, right? But I couldn't tell you the professor's name. I could not tell you what color the professor was, what kind of style the professor wore. I couldn't tell you any of that. I don't really. That kind of impression was not made on me because I was too busy memorizing the names of all the little parts of the eyeball and shit like that. But in any case, yeah. So it's apparently of vital importance that we get people who are like Latino little people with only one leg to teach this, because otherwise other Latino little people with only one leg won't be able to learn it. Like that's how the the woke mind works. Then we have
Latinx. Hannah.
I don't accept that. And I don't have to. There we go. So then we have the Hispanic AGEP Alliance for the Environmental Science and Engineering Professoriate. And it's just associate degree programs. So they're again specifying only these people. We want only these people to get degrees so that they will teach these courses. And that's a city college. And it looks like they got over $2 million. Over $1 million. I swear this is. I'm going to widen this out a little bit just to make sure I'm not missing text. Don't give me that. I don't want the analytics. That's why I didn't have it that wide. All right, we'll put it back. Go away. Yeah, see, I told you it's going to be hard to read, but there we go.
It's hard to tell one from the other until you highlight it. Even when you highlight it, they all sort of blend into each other.
The Puerto Rico Center for Environmental Neuroscience. Now, I'm not 100% sure. This could mean neuroscience that focuses on the impact of like what your surroundings are. Do you live in an urban area? Do you live in a rural area? Do you have a support network? Do you not have a? That would be reasonable. But with woke ideology, it could actually mean how climate change affects your brain or some shit like that.
Or how silence is violence. How silence can affect you neuroscientifically, and therefore do violence to your brain. Like how when men give you the silent treatment, it actually hurts your brain. But not the other way around. We don't even. The other way around's not a thing. Shut
up. Yeah. Yeah, art fours, I'm with you there. Main thing I remember about college is getting the lecture notes and just showing up for tests. Oh, and also playing Genesis on the computers in the computer lab, the text version.
I remember getting drunk. I remember other things that that did not happen. So
there you go. So, University of California, Santa Cruz, got over $1 million to advance inclusive leaders in astronomy. Inclusive, just in case any of the stars and novas and shit feel left out. Xavier Advance Adaptation Supporting Transformation Intersectional Directions to Engender Success. Another $1 million, right? And my state's not left out. Okay, now I've got to look at this because I've seen LSAMP a couple of times here. So we're going to figure out what the fuck that is because I think I remember that having... Yep. It's woke. Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation focused on increasing the number of students from underrepresented groups in STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics fields. It provides support to students pursuing STEM degrees and aims to enhance their success in graduate programs and STEM careers. So it's basically a program that gives money, but only if you're part of a protected minority group. So if you're dirt poor and you're a white male, especially if you're a straight white male, you can go fuck yourself as far as these people are concerned. They don't care if you have any success.
It's communism. It's race communism. It's gender communism. It's all the same shit that tore the world apart in the 20th century. Rebranded as race and gender bullshit. It's communism, and this should be no surprise to anyone who's been to university in the last century or so. Everything's communist. Everything. Yeah. You can't even study fucking Armenian poetry without the woke scolds getting into your shit and teaching you how to be a feminist. Like everything in university is feminism now, and it has been since I was in university, and presumably since Hannah was, and since our parents were there.
Actually, one of the things my parents told me about, they met at the university the first university that I attended, and they had a program. We had a similar program where you once a week you had like an hour to maybe a 2-hour presentation that the students would show up for. It was mandatory for freshmen, and then if you were, an upperclassman beyond freshman, you didn't have to go, but you could. And they did something different every week. Like there were just dramatically different things that they did from week to week. But one time when my parents were there, they had people come in and talk about the welfare program and how it was helping their communities. And the speaker that made the biggest impression on my parents was the lady that talked about how she was having another baby soon so she could get a color TV.
What?
Not kidding. She could afford a color TV because she would get more cash assistance.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that pretty much shaped their opinion of the welfare program. Like and it's partly where I come from too in regard to my opinions on that program. It's one of the reasons why I have that banner without an image on it on my X account that just has black background and in white text it says, "Stop paying women to make stupid choices." Because that's not a good reason to have a baby. It's really not.
No.
But yeah, first you have OSU getting money for this, and then you have the same group, same Louis Stokes STEM Pathways implementation at Columbus State University, also in Ohio. Between the two of them, they got over 7,000, almost 8. So, and then Kansas got it for the same thing, almost, or not 1,000,000, but another almost 3 million. So like there you go. And just spending money left and right to specifically limit funding for this stuff to minority groups who are also eligible for any funding that the straight white male is eligible for. North Carolina has an institutional transformation model to increase minority STEM doctoral student and faculty success. And you notice this is all DEI. This is every single one of them. Doctoral student, minority STEM doctoral student success. Between these two, you got about 1.5 million. There's another one here. And so you got North Carolina State, North Carolina Ag and Tech, North Carolina at Charlotte. You have North Carolina at Charlotte, another almost 1 million for the same thing. University of California, Mercked. That I wonder if never mind. And again, to increase underrepresented minority faculty. So this is paying to get more people of minority status into the university's administration as professors. There's another one, underrepresented minority faculty. Increase underrepresented minority faculty. There's another one, and what struck me about this, we talked a few years ago about the sort of connections between what the right likes to call cultural Marxism, which is an outcropping of Marxism that does trace its roots back to Eastern Marxism, but the connection between cultural Marxism and modern feminism, intersectional feminism, and in that discussion, we discussed something called the Long March through the institutions, and the idea behind the Long March through the institutions is that you can't convince people to adopt in mass ideas that are on their face profoundly stupid and that are going to force people to give up their freedoms and their property and their control over their lives and so on. So if you want to do that, you have to con them, and you can't do that without shutting out other voices. And then you also have to have authority over them to make them comply if they don't fall for the con. And so the Long March through the institutions was literally just communists slowly over time occupying as many influential positions within the areas of politics, entertainment, news media and education in order to influence people, in order to be the people that were controlling the laws that got passed and so on. And that actually came out of Asian communism. And that was brought to the United States by Herbert Marcuse, who's God, I can't think of her name now. The chick that well, let me really quick. Because I'm gonna see if I can. Angela Davis is a direct connection there between intersectional feminism and cultural Marxism. But
she
that long march through the institution. Did she what?
Didn't she kill somebody?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's so. If I remember right. What she did was she was part of a group that went after a courthouse with guns because somebody was in there that they didn't want to get tried and convicted. I may be wrong. I may be thinking of somebody else, but yeah, I believe that in the course of what they did, they killed somebody. But that's feminist for you.
Mm-hmm.
Feminism is violent. But this example after example of all this money being spent to specifically place minorities using communist funding methods, socialist funding methods, in university positions in STEM is a communist takeover of science, technology, everything else that isn't already taken over, because they've taken over. They really have already kind of taken over medicine, especially psychology and sociology. They've taken over business. They've taken over the legal fields. You get intersectional feminist material as part of your coursework almost no matter what you study. And so they're just trying to ensure that you will get socialist and intersectional feminist material in your science courses, in your technical training, in your labs, right? Won't matter in your math classes. You're going to get feminist math. That's why they end their dollar amounts with a 9 instead of rounding up to the next dollar. And we have this again, traditionally underrepresented. Yeah. Historically underrepresented. And it's all faculty. It's not students. Faculty. So this is the one of the things that I wanted to point out. Let's see if I've got inclusive learning and teaching. Treating minorities like you have to hold their hand all the way through.
I would love to know if anyone's going to actually look into whether or not these programs are effective in any way, shape, or form.
I hope they're not.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that I don't want to see minorities involved. It's that I don't want to see socialism and communism be the pathway that they become involved.
Yeah.
Because that infects them with the woke mind virus. The idea that they can't get things if they're not handed to them. Mm-hmm. And that they deserve to have things handed to them at other people's expense because they're victims of something historically that didn't happen to them during their lifetime.
Yeah.
Right. That's very dangerous. And if you have like your entire faculty infected with that mentality, you end up in a situation where the students are going to get taught that mentality, even if it has absolutely fuck all to do with what they're being taught to do. So you're trying to teach people calculus, or trying to teach people the various courses involved in understanding, say, chemistry or physics. And while you should be talking about mathematic formulas, you should be talking about the various reactions that happen between chemicals and explaining, how it works and so on, and doing experimentation and figuring out, can you draw calcium from this water and separate the two? What method are you using? How does it work? And how do you write a report about it and stuff like that? No, you're going to be talking about a little bit of history about how women weren't allowed to do science until feminists came along and forced society to allow them in the late 20th century. Sorry, to the women who existed prior to the 1900s, who died doing scientific experimentation because they worked with things that they didn't know were dangerous. But in any case, yeah. So this is what we're getting. This is what they're shutting down. This is what the National Organization for Women is whining about: the inability to do the long march through the institutions of STEM education. Right? Some of this is dumber even. See if I can get past all of the... Here's one. All right. There it is. Okay. Collaborative research, developing an online game to teach middle school students science research practice in the life sciences. All right. That's a great idea that a game company should do and market and take the risk to make it great and convince educators and the school boards that control the curriculum and the materials that are going to be used in the classroom, or parents, to buy it.
Are they talking about Farmville? Are they talking about Candy Crush Saga? What's going on?
Yeah, they're essentially Harvard University wanted to spend $700,000 almost to create a game targeted specifically for middle school students, to understand one very specific aspect of science, scientific research. I learned how to type from a video game. My son learned how to read playing Breath of Fire 3 before he started school. Their video games can be very educational. I had games to help me study when I was in high school, to help me study geometry, analyt, and calculus. Right? There are games to help you learn languages. Right? And you go buy them. You pay money for those games. You don't have the government fund their creation, because then you get a shit game. And these were games. These were not walking simulators, by the way. Here we have more promotion of underrepresented minorities. More LSAMP. This one just got me. The evolution of evolvability in microbial populations. Now,
what the fuck does that mean?
Wonder why.
What the fuck?
I wonder why that one was
evolvability. What?
So,
explain this bullshit.
That sounds like they were studying whether there is a generational effect on how much genetic change occurs over the generations of breeding, like bacteria, yeast. It wouldn't be viruses, because I don't, but microbial organisms.
That's the class that you take before you do gain of function research.
Well, yeah. Or even, it's the dumb thing is we already kind of know the answer to this because we have superbugs now,
Mhm.
right? We have and not just antibiotic resistant bacteria, but antibiotic resistant bacteria that is doing this thing. So you take antibiotics and they basically genocide the bacteria. They're poisonous to the bacteria. They chemically destroy the bacteria. So it's a chemical weapon, right? So antibiotic resistant bacteria, there's certain antibiotic resistant bacteria that have developed a if I remember right, it's an enzyme that they shoot at the molecules of the chemical that the antibiotic is, and so that it'll interact with that chemical and hydrolyze it, meaning it changes it chemically, and you get water as a side result. And then it is no longer the chemical that is dangerous to the bacteria, so the bacteria is now unaffected by it. They are actually shooting at our chemical weapons. And so we had to develop bacteria killing combos that you have to take in conjunction with each other so that when they fire off that enzyme, I may be wrong, it may be something other than an enzyme, but it's essentially a chemical. When they fire off their molecular weapon, we have a molecular weapon that binds to it so that it doesn't hydrolyze the molecules of the antibiotic, and then the antibiotic can still kill the bacteria. And there are some bacteria that are immune to that combo now. And one of them is an E. coli bacteria. It's some scary shit. So it's silly to study the idea that they might stop evolving, because it's pretty damn clear that they do continue to evolve. There are some infectious organisms that are so unkillable that if a building gets infected with it, if a building gets contaminated, and this usually happens with medical facilities, it's not usually some other type like your apartment building or something. The only thing they can do is take formaldehyde gas and just send it down through the building, make the entire building so toxic that no organism can survive there. And then the building is unusable for however long it takes for that chemical to be gone from the building again, in order to get rid of those bacteria. And yes, there are staph lines that are that bad. There are flesh-eating bacteria that are heading that direction. There are STIs. There's a super gonorrhea that is antibiotic resistant. There is syphilis that is antibiotic resistant. Read about how people die from syphilis, and you will find that is scary as shit too. The sexual revolution was suicide. It was open suicide. The baby boomers just, for some reason, didn't figure that out. Meredith G, by the way, has given us $5. She says, HBR Talk 351, honey for the badgers to reward you for pulling on your mud boots so you can trudge through the piles of bullshit. and yeah, that is some, but yeah, so I don't know. It's like Harvard could conceivably argue that is research that's worth doing, but they could probably also get that much money from drug companies to do it. They don't really need the federal government to pay them for that. So let's see. We're looking at, again, more Long March through the institution here. Like, this is just example after example here. Women in success, improving, but minority women, right? Not white girls. Improving minority women's success. So Long March through the institution in pink. And it's just again and again and again, and here we have another women.
Each time we hop over one of these, it's another 500,000.
Yeah,
Just
and
pumped
it's
into useless bullshit.
millions and millions. Some of them are tens of millions. Some of them are a few million. The first one was tens of millions, actually. But yeah, and it's all there. We have diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM teaching, learning, and leadership. So they want people in management to be woke. All right, long march, and this is 10 million. Long
That's
march.
crazy. That's just insane.
Yep. And then we get occasionally we get stuff that I'm not quite sure exactly what this is. But here we go. Georgia State University Research Foundation Incorporated, Career, Black Girl Brilliance, and STEM Identity Development. Okay, if you are studying science, your identity is nerd.
Right.
Be loud and proud about it because you're the ones that are creating the future. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you are studying engineering, your identity is Spurg. Be proud of it. You are building the future.
But it's hateful to not let the jocks in on the nerds territory.
Yeah,
And
well, some of us are jocks.
In the event that black girls identify as jocks, then you need to let them take over the nerd space, and see that they can improve it.
You could be Jerds, but you got to make sure that everybody knows that it starts with a J and not a G, because that GERD sucks.
Yes.
I mean, is physical education being taken over by black girl brilliance, or are they leaving that to the boys, because the boys are the ones who bring in the moolah on account of you having the best possible team?
I had 3 different gym teachers during my K through 12 career, or that were women, and 1 guy. That I do remember, because like I had beloved teachers. Like most of my teachers, I have very loving memories of. And then there was one female gym teacher that is not included in that group. And it isn't because of the way she taught gym class. It's because she had a quote unquote inappropriate relationship with one of the students.
Oh,
Not me.
geez.
It was a boy. And when I heard about it, I'm like, we had a 6th grade teacher that got busted for that. Actually was my track coach for a year. And the girl was 18, but she was still a student. And he went to jail for 2 years. This woman went to teach at another school.
Oh my God.
And her victim was underage.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Yep. But yeah, 3 out of my 4 gym teachers growing up were female. But I'm female, and in high school, the gym teacher for the boys was the football coach, and the gym teacher for the girls was the volleyball coach. So in elementary school, though, it's mostly women. So the boys and the girls in my class all had female gym teachers. But yeah.
The male gym teachers get arrested, whatever they do, and the female gym teachers don't get arrested, no matter what they do. And this persists into college, into university, and yet universities aren't particularly bothered in shaking up the gender makeup of the physical education departments. They're far too interested in taking all the nerd-driven departments like STEM and flushing all the white males out and replacing them with anything else.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, they have teams in universities just like they have teams in schools, and they want their teams to win. And there's a lot to be said about college basketball and stuff like that, and the degree to which male students are being exploited, in which they will be given any opportunity as long as they never ever drop out of the team.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different ballpark apart from what happens in the science departments.
Yeah.
We probably don't even have time to get into that tonight.
Well, I don't know, but I should probably clarify. My male gym teacher was not the coach that got arrested. By the way, my male gym teacher was another of the football coaches. So the two football coaches were not the ones. It was a track coach. But when I was in junior high, my asthma kicked up into high gear. I decided I was going to wimp out one day in gym class, and my mom had a talk with my gym teacher about not letting me do that. So, but he, instead of drill sergeanting me, what he did was, "It's okay, Hannah. We know you can't handle it. You can sit it out. You just sit over there and rest." And like for the entire rest of the class, I was like trying to be out in front of everybody. "I can do this. You can't tell me I can't handle this." Like that was the end of that. So he knew how to handle chicks. But
little did they know just how many viruses you can survive, Hannah.
Yeah.
yeah, that's true.
Nothing's going to kill this woman ever. I swear to God.
If anything does, it's going to be the woke mind virus via lead poisoning, just depending on who takes over the country. All right. Not at my own hands, just a reference to what happens when Marxists take over. They don't like it when there's people that disagree with them. But yeah, we have like this whole page here is almost all Long March through the institutions. And it keeps going. This is all ways to improve success in STEM pathways. Families, faculty, and industry in STEM. So some of it is, like it's disguised in language that makes it sound like they're not talking about women and minorities or anything like that. But they're still coddling the students. They're still attempting to convince the students you can't do this without us. Right? Mathematics, persistence through inquiry, and equity. Redeveloping gateway with mathematics in a 2-year HSI to promote success in STEM. Redeveloping is like reimagining, right? Reimagining mathematics is probably one of the dumbest things our society ever did. And they have a dishonest way of doing it too. And I'm going to use an example of a conversation I had on X when it was still Twitter. And I'm not going to try to look for that conversation, but it was during the time when the debate over the idea of 2 + 2 = 5 being possible was trending. And I made this explanation of numbers. All numbers are how we there are language for quantities and the way that quantities interact. That's all math is. It's a language for how quantities interact with each other depending on what we're doing with them. So if you add 2 and 2 together, you get the same result every time because those quantities are static. 2 is always 2. It may be described differently, but 2 is always a set of one item and another item. It doesn't matter if they're the same type of item or 2 different items. You say, I have 2 items it doesn't matter if one of them is a car and the other one is a Twinkie. You're talking about two items. If you say I have two Twinkies, you have two Twinkies. And there were arguments over things like, well, if you say 2 + 2 = 4, but you're actually talking about two different items plus two other different items. You don't have 4 of the same thing. You actually only have one of each. And yes, but you have 4 items. And
But what if the universe only consisted of 2 neutrons orbiting around each other? Then would that be 2? Well, maybe that wouldn't be 2. And that's how deep they go into their shallow, low slung work through the institutions.
What they were doing was a fundamental mistake in that the way that you describe a quantity is, like if you say I have 2 pears, you're talking about 2 of the same thing. But if you say I have 2 fruits, it could be any 2 fruits, but you're still saying 2 fruits. It doesn't matter if they're 2 different things. It's 2 fruits on both sides of the equation, right? It's not, if you cut up the pears and you cut up an apple and you put them in the blender and you blend them until you get juice, it's not 2 + 2 = 1. Like two fruits plus two fruits in a blender equals 1 blender full of juice. Right? It's 2 fruits plus 2 fruits equals 4 fruits, which you then put into the blender and make the juice. And that fundamental failure to understand, or that deliberate obfuscation of the fact that the calculation is how many fruits are you dealing with, or how many pieces of fruit are you dealing with, not what the end product, how you describe the end product. This individual came at me with, well, if we're talking about wavelengths, it changes the entire equation. No, it doesn't. Because you're not talking about what happens to the wavelengths when you put them together at, say, different angles and they blend. You're talking about the total number of wavelengths that are going into that blend. How many wavelengths are going into that blend? Well, you have 2 from this sound source and 2 from this sound source, or 2 from this direction and 2 from this direction. So you have a total of 4 that you're blending. What happens to them after they blend is a different equation. And that degree of intellectual dishonesty or intellectual disconnect allows people to convince the bottom half of the intellectual capability spectrum to adopt untruths as truths. Right? And that is something that that's basically what they were trying to do with the 2 + 2 argument, right?
And it's all in pursuit of the gender ideology. They want to say that men and women are not different. Well, fundamentally, they want to give women all the rights and strip all the rights away from men. That's where they start.
Yeah.
And from there they go, well, that doesn't mean men and women are a thing. In terms of biology, that doesn't mean that XX is a thing and XY is a thing. In terms of chemistry, it doesn't mean that acid and alkaline are a thing. And in terms of physics, it doesn't mean that up and down are a thing. And in terms of mathematics, it doesn't mean that 2 + 2 = 4. They'll take it to any subject they like for the sake of screwing things up between men and women. Yeah. When I say they, I mean did the gender studies parasites that have indeed wormed their way into every subject in university. And again, anyone who's been to university in the last 30 years will tell you that even if they were studying physics, eventually at some point someone came to them and said, you need to do a module in gender studies. What? No, yeah, you need to incorporate this into your physics degree. Like, what? Why? Because the university says so. Fuck me. Okay. What? Okay. Fine.
You're going to take the course on how only women understand water because men don't have periods.
Shit like that. Yeah.
There was an article that was a real article that somebody actually made that argument, forgetting the fact that the human body is mostly comprised of contained bits of water. But so only women can understand fluid mechanics. But yeah, so when you see language that looks normal on stuff like this, it still is very possible that they used it to describe something that is not what it looks like. And when they say, redeveloping gateway mathematics to promote success in STEM, they may be talking about making it so that you don't have to have the right answers to pass the class. Right? When they talk about the families, faculty, and industry in STEM education to improve success, they may be talking about getting money for students that are from single mother homes, and excluding students that are from two-parent homes, even if their income is just as low or lower than the single mother homes. And I'm not saying that's actually the thing, but it's one of the types of things that they would squeeze into something like that. Because when they say families, if you have a mom and a dad and no step siblings and no half siblings, they're not talking about your family. And so we're seeing, like, as you go through, long march, all the way down here. This one's, and some of the language too is like, they'll couch this stuff in language that normies aren't gonna, you're gonna look at it and it's gonna be like, okay, this is gobbledygook. The development and validation of a scale to assess epistemic exclusion in minoritized and non-minoritized STEM faculty. Does that word salad come with ranch dressing, or is ranch considered racist because of
It's white.
it's white? The white I will not eat the white dressing. The development and validation of a scale to assess epistemic exclusion in minoritized and non-minoritized STEM faculty. So there's another thing for people to understand, right? And when I was in college, I started learning a little bit of the sort of history behind why they were trying to pass this law called the Violence Against Women Act, and arguing that there was no federal law that addressed intimate partner and sexual violence, because that wasn't true. There was the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act of 1984. It had been in place since I was in elementary school, and it was signed into law by President Reagan. So there was a law, and there were shelters. There was a 24-hour hotline. There was a designation that law enforcement was trained. That women didn't have to fight back in order to accuse rape if there was, coercion involved, if there was a weapon involved, if there was something that would coerce them into cooperating without fighting back. And similarly, that things that would be criminal if you did them in a bar to somebody else against their will are just as criminal if you do them in the home to somebody else against their will. So you can't just walk up and clock your family member because you're drunk, and it just gets brushed under the rug by the cops, right? That already existed. So why was I reading all this shit about we need a law for this? We already had a law for this. And then there was this hysteria at the same time about this massive epidemic of serial rapists on university campuses that everybody was sure existed. And in 1987, when I think I would have been a sophomore when that actually came out. But it was 1987. Part of that year I was a freshman. Part of that year I was a sophomore in high school. There was a study done, and I'm putting that in quotes, scare quotes for people who can't see it, by Professor Mary P. Koss at Kent State University, that Kent State, like the four dead in Ohio, Kent State, where she surveyed women, college-age women, about their sexual experiences. She had a set of questions that she asked, and she took their answers, and she reported that 1 in 8 had been victimized, had been raped by the time they were in university. And then Ms. Magazine was like, oh, hey, we want you to do a bigger study, and we're going to publish it because we want everybody to panic about this. And so they did. They did a bigger study, and they came out with 1 in 4. There were 2 aspects to the study. One of them was that they did a survey on, with questions like not have you ever been raped, but have you ever had sex when you didn't want to because a man gave you alcohol? Which there's a couple of different reasons why you might answer that question yes, that don't make it rape. Like you decide when you're leaving your dormitory room, I'm not gonna do anything stupid tonight. I'm not going home with anybody. I'm not gonna sleep with anybody. And but then this hot guy buys you a few drinks, then he leaves, and then you go home with some other guy because you're a little bit tipsy, and have sex with him. Nobody has raped you if that happens, but they interpreted it that way, and then the other half of the survey was what their opinions were about, did they get this right? Do you think that what we have identified as you being raped was actually a rape? And 1 in 4 of Koss's respondents agreed with her. The other 3 out of 4 were, no, that wasn't. In fact, half of them were like, I'm still dating that guy. I went on to sleep with him again. We might get married. So this was definitely not valid research. It was really fucked up. She did not have a good survey, but because they got the results they wanted, which was a high rate of rape, that was how they validated the survey. It wasn't valid because they had proved that the answers, the way their interpretation of the answers they got was correct. It was valid in scare quotes because they finally were able to expose, in scare quotes, how common, in scare quotes, rape was. And that was shit, right? But that is how feminists validate their survey methods. So this development and validation of a scale to assess epistemic exclusion in minoritized and non-minoritized STEM faculty means that they're going to look for a way to make it look like minorities are excluded. And if they get the numbers they want, that's when they're going to decide that survey is valid. That's a valid methodology. And the other way they validate it is there is a shitload of research that cites Mary P. Koss's survey method, or uses Mary P. Koss's survey method, and cites her 1993 paper on rape prevalence research methods to as their source for their definition of what constitutes rape. And her definition is basically anything that a woman didn't do to a man. Right? If a woman can do it to a man, it's not. But if a woman is likely to do it to a man, it's not. But if a man is likely to do it to a man or a woman, then it is. Right? So every form of potential penetration, but the victim has to be penetrated. if the victim forces if the perpetrator forces the victim to penetrate, then she doesn't define it as rape. And the national, the NISBS, national, I can't think of the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey done by the Centers for Disease Control in the United States, every 2 years for a few years, for like almost a decade, they used that definition, and I requested, using a Freedom of Information Act request, their numbers from, I believe, the 2010. It might have been the 2012, but I think it was the 2010 survey. And they gave me a rough time about even giving me those numbers. And I was very specific with which numbers I wanted. Then they refused to release them to me without a conference call with the researchers, because they wanted to know how I was going to use those numbers. And so I kind of interviewed them a little bit, because I do that. And I asked them, why did you exclude forced to penetrate from the definition of rape? It's the only method that women would use to perpetrate against men. Why did you exclude that? They couldn't tell me. The researcher spent like 2 minutes stumbling over herself about nobody ever even investigated that before, which isn't true, and a whole bunch of other things, but she couldn't explain because she didn't know. She didn't know why they excluded being forced to penetrate, being forcibly enveloped, in other words, by your rapist, as a part of the definition of rape.
That's not shady at all.
No. And if you want to hear that, somewhere, I think it's on Allison's channel, is a video titled, see if I can remember this right. It's titled, I think, Rape. This is from a long time ago, so sorry about that. I think I can find it just by doing this. Maybe not. It's rape culture. Let's see. MRAs versus feminist rape culture, I think it is. Yeah, men's rights versus feminist rape culture, explained using puzzle pieces, and it's on Allison Tiemann's YouTube channel from 11 years ago. So
I remember that.
And she starts by going through and clearly demonstrating the ridiculousness of treating it like, if you do the exact same act, coitus, penis and vagina sex, right? And one of the partners has it done to them against their will. So they're not a partner. One of the people involved has it done to them against their will. If the doer is a man, you consider it rape, but if the doer is a female, is a woman, you don't. She demonstrated the ridiculousness of that idea using puzzle pieces. And then she played that part of that phone call where I asked that question and they couldn't answer it. So there you go. Look up that video and watch it if you haven't seen it. It is insane, like what they did. And they didn't understand. They didn't. But that citation gives it authority, because that's the federal government of the United States saying, this is our method, this is our definition. And we got it from, they have her listed in their sources cited. Right? And they used her survey. They used her, did you ever have sex when you didn't want to because someone gave you alcohol? Did you ever have sex when you didn't want to because this or that? And there are some instances where an answer to that would be pretty straightforward. Did you ever have sex when you didn't want to because someone held you down against your will and imposed it on you? That's pretty clear cut, right? But did you ever have sex when you didn't want to because you were high? That sort of depends on whether it's incapacitating or not. Is it you got high and you did something stupid, you initiated something stupid? I knew people that did that when I was in school. People that got high and then or drunk and would grab someone and go off, into another room in a party and fuck their brains out. Like, did that constitute that person who initiated with another person who was also drunk or high? Was that person, that initiator, a victim because she was female?
It reminds me of that. I think it was Alexander the Great said, "I would rather face 100 lions led by a sheep than 100 sheep led by a lion." And this is largely what's going on with feminist academia. You have the likes of Mary Koss, who is evil, just straight up evil. But you can't get to Mary Koss because you have to go through 1,000 sheep before you get to her. You have to call someone up, and then you'll find yourself talking to a sheep. And the best you can ask for after that is talking to a different sheep, and then a different sheep, all the way up until you've got through 1,000 sheep before you can get to anyone who can explain to you why forced envelopment is not rape. And you'll never find them. You'll just never find them because
you definitely won't find it by talking to people.
Yeah.
What I had to do. There was the scale they use to determine whether they think someone's violence is aggressive or defensive, and I can't remember what it was called, but I went looking for that, right? And there's been other things like that where you read a piece of research and they say, we use this thing that's established in feminist research, and it'll be some scale or some survey method or something of that nature where someone else used it for the very first time in their research. They established it, and then other research cited their research as a source for things that were taken as a given. Like you might, if you were doing research on something to do with the physics of aerodynamics, that how it affects gas mileage that you get in a car, and maybe you cite some established law of physics, given that these things we know are already true because they've been proved, right? That is proper because they've been established there, through proof with evidence or experimentation, right? But with the feminist method, all it takes is Mary P. Koss writes a paper and she says, I think it's not rape when a woman does it to a man because men don't feel it as deeply as women do, which was part of her argument. Men are not as traumatized, and her logic for men are not as traumatized is that they don't complain as much. But then feminists will also say men not complaining is part of toxic masculinity, when they are traumatized. Similarly, it's like, well, men can't get pregnant. Okay, but men can get saddled with 18 years of child support debt, even if the child is conceived because the mother raped them. In fact, 13-year-old boys have had that imposed on them. So that's pretty traumatic. That's 18 years of involuntary servitude to the mother, right? Who has custody of a child that she conceived by raping the father, even if the father is underage. So for years and years, in most states of the United States, a pedophile who conceived a child through raping a child could then retain custody of that child and impose a lifelong debt on her victim. But that's not as bad, apparently, as carrying a baby until you decide you don't want to, or for the whole 9 months if you decide you're going to. You know, as to the argument that is taking place in our main YouTube chat, there's a real simple standard for alcohol facilitated rape, and it was used for decades prior to feminist intervention, and it has to do with whether or not you're actually incapacitated. Right? If you cannot appraise your actions, in other words, if you don't know what you're doing, you literally don't know what you're doing, and the person engaging with you is aware of that, then mens rea is present, and it is rape. If you are unconscious and somebody does anything to you, it is an assault. If it's sexual, it's a sexual assault. Right? So it doesn't really matter whether you're drunk or not. It matters whether you're drunk enough to be incapacitated or not. And that's the line. That line has always been reasonable. And feminists decided it needed to be crossed, and decided that if a woman was tipsy and her inhibitions were lowered, but she knew that she was having sex and had the capacity to resist if she didn't want to, and she just made a bad choice while she was drunk, that they wanted that still to be called rape, but not when a woman does it to a guy. So the argument is settled. Neither one of you have it right. It's not always okay just because the person chose to drink, and it's not always rape just because the person is somewhat impaired. So again, let's see if I can get past. Okay, here we go. Study of new strategies to combat harassment in engineering.
What?
Isn't it? Harassment in engineering.
Oh my God.
All right. So my family is kind of peppered with engineers. Fair disclosure, I am autistic. Right. And I hang out with engineers who are autistic, artists who are autistic, programmers who are autistic. You don't want to piss us off. I will just tell you this right now. You do not want to create a hostile environment for us, especially if we are high functioning, like engineers are. Engineers are extremely high functioning. Right? You do not want to piss them off, even if you're another engineer, because the autist has an advantage over you. We don't get bored when we have a mission. The most singularly mundane, mind-numbingly uninteresting task becomes fascinating if it helps us create your downfall. We respond to being harassed by utterly destroying you. And I have done this at work, where I've had somebody that decided that they were going to make my life a living hell. And I have systematically entrapped them and entangled them and pretty much destroyed their capability of remaining in that environment as a result. So it's a very bad idea to engage in harassment in an engineering workplace. I wouldn't recommend anybody do it.
Having said that, there's many a workplace where your autistic position,
Cool.
your artistic consideration, really won't give you any leeway over a narcissist. There's many a legal and employment-based situation where narcissists don't even have to make any effort. They can just accuse you of something. And it sort of doesn't matter how many 4D chess games you play, the narcissist will win because your employer has been primed to give the win to the narcissist. Like you do have the intellectual advantage as the autist, but you do not have the social advantage. Unfortunately, we live in a time where the narcissists have skewed every legal avenue so as to allow the narcissists to win. So, yes, you do have the intellectual advantage as autists, but you have to act with this extra level of game theory if you really want to win.
Yeah, the environment that I did that in was retail, which is a mostly female dominated environment at the level that I was at. It is completely controlled by human resources departments that are woke as fuck and have been forever. And you have to understand the nuances of how documentation works in your institution better than the other person does, and how the social politics, the expectations regarding work ethic and behavior between like professional behavior between coworkers or colleagues, what's expected by management in order to do what I did. And it wasn't as hard as you think, because narcissists can't help themselves. They go on the attack, they don't cover their asses, and they're really good at taking down people that don't see through their shit. And they're really good at taking down people they're good at taking down normies. They're really good at taking down people who don't have a thick skin, right? But they're not so good at taking down people who are able to use being good at hospitality and creating an environment in which they've built a level of trust and reputation with a body of people that cannot be under the attacker's control, which in the retail environment is the customers, right? The narcissist tried to enlist customers in her attack, and they were my customers. Like, they were not her customers. By that, I mean, I was already established as one of their favorite helpers when they came into the store. So like there was a lot that went into it. I won't go through the whole thing, but by the end of it, she quit in embarrassment because she made a fool of herself in front of everybody and then couldn't spin it. There was nothing she could do. But anyway, in any battle like that, following every existing rule in the workplace to the letter and documenting out the ass are your friends. And that's that's the only hints I'll give you. But yeah, I sincerely doubt that engineers give a flying fuck what color or sex or religion or race or height or weight or anything their colleagues are. They're too focused on the math and the outcome, the design, the function, maybe the beauty of the design, But 100%, they don't really care what you look like. They don't even care if you have body odor unless it's so bad that it's intolerable. They're busy doing the work. They don't have time to think about that shit. But here we have more Long March. This one's interesting. Recognition of gender stereotyping as a determinant of stereotype assimilation and contrast effects resulting from subtle bias exposure in STEM.
The fuck does any of this mean?
Okay, if I get that one, you have to keep off the croutons because I'm on a low carb diet now. Like that. Can I get some like grilled chicken on that salad? So recognition of gender stereotyping. Like that's a concept. Recognition of gender stereotyping, which is essentially, you know, the handout to the butterfly meme. Is this gender stereotyping? You know, and any factor that's taking place in the workplace, right? So if Susie comes to work in a dress, you know, is that gender stereotyping, or does it have to be a specific color? If it's denim, is that not gender stereotyping? Right? As a determinant of stereotype assimilation. So as a causative factor, in other words, or a contributing factor in you adopting the stereotype as part of your identity, who you are. I must wear a bow in my hair because I am a girl. And contrast effects. So I'm assuming a little bit here, but contrast effects would probably resulting from subtle bias. Contrast effects resulting from subtle bias would indicate like maybe differences in gender presentation that are dramatically different from each other that result from maybe not spoken bias, but maybe somebody being treated a little differently because they're not presenting the way someone expects them to present. And so what the research title argues is that if Susie goes to work in cargo pants with tools sticking out of her pockets and doesn't have a hair bow, maybe she has a buzz cut, and she feels conspicuous and she thinks she's being treated differently from Julie, who shows up in a pink dress and a bow in her hair and carries a purse and doesn't have any tools. And so she she adopts stereotypical behaviors based on maybe they treat her, maybe she thinks they're treating her like she must be a lesbian, so that she starts acting the part. That's basically the argument that they're making, that it affects her and changes her and imposes an identity on her, which sounds a little bit like when you're in elementary school and you would rather play football with the boys than tag with the girls, or gossiping over by the swing set with the girls, and your teacher says, hey, you know, you might be trans. But apparently it's bad when it happens in the workplace.
Yeah, show me a man who decides to become a woman but doesn't start wearing dresses and makeup and all that shit. Show me a woman who decides to become a man but doesn't start wearing fucking combat trousers and short hair and all that shit. Like it all comes down to aesthetic presentation. Like, I have to wonder how different this situation would be if we could just get it through to people that aesthetic presentation is not the same as biological sex, and this is what's being presented to us in terms of presentation. That someone could be born a man, but if he presents as a woman, then he's a woman. Okay, what does that mean? It means he wears dresses. It means he wears makeup. It means he presents as a narcissist, and that's what it boils down to. And if a woman wants to become a man, in the rare occasion that does happen, she wears short hair that isn't styled that much. She wears unrevealing clothing. She, in an attempt to present in that modest way that a man usually presents. And I'm like, this isn't male and female. This is, frankly, it's narcissism and autism. Well, it's not even that. Like men dress modestly and women dress immodestly. But because women have been accustomed to presenting themselves as vulnerable, and men have been accustomed to presenting themselves as invulnerable. And yes, this is largely because women are narcissists and men are autists. Yeah. Not all, hashtag not all, obviously. But this is like, and I really feel like this should be one like slick explanation away from snapping everyone out of this delusion. And if only it was. Like, if it was okay for men to wear a lower garment that doesn't have a seam in the middle, and that this would solve all the problems. Like, a skirt does not make a woman. Like, for most of human history, men wore garments that in modern parlance would be called skirts. For most of human history, there was no such thing as makeup. Like, this way that modern women doll themselves up, it's not even feminine. I know people like to look at that and say, "Oh, yeah, women should be feminine like this." Even traditional conservative women should doll themselves up in this way. But even that's not like necessarily natural. When you look at the vast majority of human history, people didn't dress in those ways. If anything, men wore more revealing clothing, and it wasn't even for the sake of being seen. It was because they had to do fucking farm work and shit like that. Like, it was never anything to do with how you appear. It's really only in the last couple of centuries, maybe several centuries, when you consider the history of romantic chivalry, that it was considered normal for women to dress themselves and adorn themselves in a narcissistic way. But we've just assumed that that's normal. It's not. It's not normal, and it's never been normal. It's people who can get away with presenting themselves as victims who can dress in revealing narcissistic ways. And for a lot of human history, that was the upper class. That was the aristocracy, especially in Renaissance France and whatnot, where the men and women wore huge wigs and, tights and whatever it was that accentuated their figure, that showed their vulnerability. And yeah, this has always been the case. It's just that people in the modern age can't recognize that that's why women are dressing like this. and making themselves up like this. It's not because it's a natural thing for women to do. It's because it's a natural thing for the ruling class to do.
Well, there's another aspect to it. And this is any gynocentrist listening is going to call me a misogynist for this. All right. So there is a form of information in biology that uses chemistry essentially to invade host environments. Right? And the way that it does it is by creating or using proteins on its surface that binds to specific vulnerable receptors on the host, acting sort of like it's like a key that unlocks the door and the host lets them in. And kind of the way a vampire will, look like it's in trouble, vulnerable, and try to get you to open your door and let them in, right? And then once they've entered, they'll use various ways to affect their environment to make it change to suit their needs, right? And that's one biological thing. And I'll explain what it is in a bit. But that uses proteins, right? Women use politics, and women use human instinct as a means to do that. So women will accentuate their vulnerability because the receptor in men is their instinctive protectiveness of their family and their community and the weak within their family and their community. So women will accentuate their vulnerability, their neoteny, right? Their appearance of sadness, and also their appearance of being sexually ripe. Like when women try to make their lips look fuller and their cheeks look a little redder and their eyes look a little wider and they show off the cleavage, it's to accentuate the fertility, right? Because that also pulls on men's instinct to reproduce. And that's those keys to get in. And then the next thing you know, whatever environment they've entered has to be altered to suit the woman's sensibilities and desires and interests, or she's victim of it. And it's that way whether it's your home, a community, a workplace, an organization, a hobby community, a professional community, doesn't matter. Even your locker rooms and bathrooms, even men's locker rooms and bathrooms. And women will go into a men's bathroom because the line for the ladies is too long. And then they'll bitch about the fact that there are men in there with their dicks exposed using the urinals. Like, I didn't want to see that. Well, you went into the men's restroom, lady. That's what's in there. Okay. There are penises in the men's restroom. That's where you go to take your penis out and pee in the urinal. So don't go in there if you don't want to see a penis. Like that's reasonable argument, right? Similarly, locker rooms. Women sued. They used the legal end of vulnerabilities. You can't keep me out of there. That's discrimination. And they used the argument that it was workplace discrimination because they were reporters. They sued for access to men's locker rooms. And then they bitched that there were naked men in there. Men's locker rooms where the showers are. Like where you take your clothes off and get wet and soap up and rinse off. You're supposed to be naked in the shower. You don't get clean in the shower if you're not naked, right? Women complained then. One reporter sued to get in there. Another reporter complained that the men were harassing her by being naked in their naked environment. Right? So that is the act of being an obligate inter-environmental parasite. I'm going to go in and use this space and you can't stop me. I have these keys to get in that bind to your instincts and to your legal precedents that you allowed me to have. But once I get in there, I'm going to redesign that environment to suit my interests, not yours, even though it's your environment, right? So the biological thing that I described that does that is a virus, an infectious disease. What we're looking at here, all this funding, all this money that's being spent, all of these examples of long march through the institution for feminism and woke ideology, for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is essentially intersectional, feminist, cultural Marxism. It's all one thing, right? It is. This is why Elon Musk calls all of this the woke mind virus, because it uses your natural compassion for the vulnerable against you as a means, as an inroad into your intellect and your spaces and your organizations, your hobbies, your professions, your way of thinking, your personal opinions, the innermost sanctum of your internal monologue, and demands that you change all of that to suit the sensibilities of the intersectional feminist cultural Marxist. And if you don't, it punishes you, makes you sick. And if you do, it punishes you, makes you sick. And women have spent the last 200 years behaving like an infectious virus instead of the other half of two partnered halves of the human race. And this is where we are now. We are spending, if you go through this whole list, like almost all of it, almost every single entry is a long march through the institution entry. When it's not, you get a few things that are even more ridiculous. Like, and it's hard to find them, but I read through a lot of this previously, and there were things like studies on this or that little gender issue where they barely related it to STEM, and it was mostly just gibberish. So basically they were getting their bullshit funded, and they were getting their long march through the institution funded. This is a virus. This is the action of an obligate, intragender parasite. Where does this money come from? Taxes. Who pays the most taxes without getting anything back? Men. This is women systematically using the government to rip off men to make a mass transfer of men's earned income to women for the purpose of engaging in this long march through the institutions. So I'm not going to go through the whole list. Like, you can tell, like, as I'm scrolling here, this is a long list. But it can be found. Let me see if I can. I don't know if I think I have the link to the page, the main page that we're reading, that we read the first page of. I have the link to that in the description. And if you click on the word terminated there, it takes you, open link, to this page. And you kind of have to dig around in here. But as you go through, there's different questions and answers. You go through the different pages, and there will be a link that says which items are being discontinued, the list of items that are being discontinued. And it's a spreadsheet file. Here it is. Yeah. So is there publicly available of list? This is it. Download a list, CSV, and it's a big list. So there you go. But next week we'll continue. We're not going to continue with that long march to the institutions. We'll continue by going to page 2 of this and looking at some of the things, some of the other demands that the National Organization for Women thinks the federal government should not stop holding men at gunpoint to fund. So with that, I don't think I have any other super chats or super chows. And I don't have any Rumble rants. So thanks you guys for going through that sludge with me and listening to me rant. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks very much, Brian, for facilitating this. And everybody else that works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all. We will see you next Thursday.
Good night, guys.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.